Okay, this is the plan.
Okay,
Do you want, I mean, I don't have to say it.
no, I won't say that.
Okay, all right.
Just say possibly ready to move.
But I mean, we are gonna take a point to them, but I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. The other thing we need to think about a little bit, perhaps not today, is we're retaining, have a beat level to oversee the operations. We only hired him to this point to oversee the RFP process.
That's a good point.
Now we've got it longer. Oh, sure.
Next
I mean,
time,
yeah,
not today.
Not today, no, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that.
Good evening. It's 4:30 here in the village of Gates Mills. We'll call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting, an appeal hearing for the property at 640 Chagrin River Road regarding the unsafe structure and site and order of demolition. At this point, I'll turn the meeting over to the law director, Todd Hunt, for a description of the procedures that will follow. Mr. Hunt.
The Mayor, as President of the council, will be presiding over this hearing. At this point in time, he has no authority to vote, but there could be, if there's a tie vote, we have 6 people here, we may have the 7th at some point. He would have the authority to break the tie, possibility. I want to give a kind of an overview of the procedure so everybody here is on the same page. This is a quasi judicial hearing. It is like a court hearing. It needs to be a procedure like a court hearing. Now, the rules of evidence will be relaxed to some extent, but nevertheless, it's only those persons who have relevant evidence and have an interest in this matter that would be able to be a witness in this matter. And this is an appeal from the village's Architectural Board of Review. The Architectural Board of Review heard a decision made by our village chief building official, David Biggert, with respect to this property, finding it an unsafe structure, unsafe property overall, and ordering demolition. The ABR had a hearing on October 8th of this year and decided that it was an unsafe structure and that the remedy should be a demolition of the structure and a cleanup of the property. At that hearing was one of the owners and her husband, who happened to be the general contractor on this project. At that hearing, they did not have the advantage of having legal counsel. I believe he was out of the country at the time. So there is in our code the right to appeal the ABR's decision to this council. You are not sitting as legislators. You are sitting as judge and jury. You are to decide this case based on fairness, and not based on any bias that you may have had prior to coming in here, and actually give everyone, meaning both the owners who are the appellants and the village, represented by Mr. Biggert, a fair hearing this evening. Um, In the event that the owners feel that they are aggrieved from any final decision of this council, they have the right to file what's known as an administrative appeal to the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. And the court is to use the record that's developed here at this hearing and that was developed at the Architectural Board of Review hearing as the record that the court would decide the case upon. And there's certain requirements that we need to follow under the revised code so that the court, if it ever gets to that point, would have the opportunity to use this record and only this record to decide any appeal from your final decision. So I will place any witnesses who wish to testify under oath, which is one of the things that's set forth in the Ohio Revised Code. Secondly, there are really two parts to this hearing this evening. The owners have asked for a continuance of this hearing in order to present some additional evidence that they are attempting to gather or have gathered and not able to present this evening. So that is the first step, the threshold issue, which they will need to address if they wish to continue to ask for such a continuance. And then the second part, if the council decides not to continue the case, and the council may decide to continue the case with certain types of conditions placed on that continuance. But if they do not, if you do not decide to grant the continuance, then the owners will then proceed with their case. Both argument and any evidence they wish to present through testimony, through documents and otherwise. I will have the opportunity, because under my professional conduct obligations, to ask questions of witnesses, both witnesses for the owners and any witnesses that the village may decide to put on, which we anticipate that may be Mr. Biggert, in order to give a fully informed information to you to make a fair decision. The council members, obviously, you will have the opportunity to ask questions also of witnesses. And then the village will have the opportunity to put on evidence. I will actually be asking questions of any village witness if we get to that point, again, to make sure that you're fully informed of all of the facts related to this. And then as council members, you will have the opportunity to ask any village witnesses questions. The owners will have the opportunity after that to do any rebuttal evidence and place it on the record. And after that point, any closing statements that may want to be made by the owner's attorney or myself, and then the council members can deliberate. You can deliberate in public. You can deliberate in private. You can't make any decisions in private. Your decision has to be made in a public meeting, public hearing, and a final vote taken in public. And I guess that's probably about it at this point in time. Any questions? Any questions from the owner? Okay.
Todd, I have a legal question, and can we have an executive session to?
It's not technically an executive session to deliberate.
No, not just, this is a legal question about what the boundaries are of our abilities as the council in hearing this appeal.
Well, I think that can be stated in public, and I don't think it's anything that's really privileged.
So, okay, so my question is this a yes or a no vote? Assuming that we do not grant the continuance and we have the hearing, are we constrained to a yes or a no vote on the decision at the ARB? Or
You always have the opportunity to fashion a remedy. Any remedy that this person would have,
okay,
you have that same authority.
okay,
And if you grant the appeal, you can put conditions on the appeal and stipulations on the appeal. You can deny the appeal. That's really the parameters. And we have our seventh council person. So good.
Right, went the wrong door.
So at this point in time, I think it's, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, they're ready to proceed. And I will place any witnesses under oath that, Mr. Patronite would want to put on, or he may want to have some preliminary opening statement.
Okay, a bit of housekeeping. We'll make a note in the minutes that Councilmember Welsh joined the meeting at 4:38. And with that, Mr. Patronite, we'll turn it over to you.
The appellants here have sort of a dilemma in that their needs are as mutual as the villages. They have to get the construction underway and the completion as soon as possible. So on one hand, we have to make our case for the record, preserve it for a 2506. And on the other hand, we want to get the show on the road. So technically, why we are asking for a continuance is because of the rapid fire decisions. I don't know if I would have influenced ARB for an extension of time or not. I was in Galapagos. And the meeting went through with the ARB. It was a rather severe and summary list of choices. The main thing being demolition, big scary demolition. There are other alternatives. The other alternatives are what the appellants want to proceed with, which is construction ASAP. Why we would need the continuance now, again, we have Mr. Angie, who has an illustrious history with the Valley as far as construction. I can say that, again, emotionally, we are all on the same page. I've passed that site since probably the mid-50s, over 9,000 times I've passed through River Road and that property. I know the Valley's complexion, as my kids call it. They grew up in Chicken Falls. I've done zoning work for Wade Hill, Orange, Shaker, and others. The bottom line is, Gates Mills is unique. We all realize that. So to proceed from here, we've got to have our ducks in a row. We need contracts formalized between the builder and the property owners. We need a little more time with, I believe, Mr. Biggert, who can speak for himself, and the builder to see if there's a revision of plans that are actually needed to get the permit before ARB. It's a little fuzzy in my mind. Does the permit application, which expired, need any amendment or not? Or can we just go forward with the existing plans? If the continuance isn't granted, then we're prepared today to go through, again, de novo, which sort of surprises me that you can't incorporate the ARB's records into this thing.
Patrick, yes, you can.
Okay,
But if you wish to put on additional evidence than what was put on in front of the ABR, you're not precluded from doing that.
great, thank you. That's one of my bullet points. So, long story short, we're asking for a continuance. With Mr. Biggert's help, he's been extraordinary. A continuance to see if there's a revision of plans needed. And this is rapid fire, a continuance to go back to ARB if that's the procedure, to see if the plans need revision or not. The other problem is with a continuance, although legally we need it, that property is now static. It's a demilitarized zone. There are things that the ARB, the conditions that they put in that are actually creating waste, legal waste. ARB demanded a flat roof was put in. Right now, the condition of the property, it's leaking. So on one hand, they can't go onto the property to do any work unless council provides some provisional and interim relief. And on the other hand, we need the continuance just to protect our legal ducks, which is, it's a shame, but we are asking for a continuance. So Mr. Biggert, Mr. Angie, and the ARB can work together for another week or two to see, again, if the permit revision's needed. So I guess that's a vote now.
It might be helpful to the council for Mr. Biggert to speak on the ABR issue. It's my understanding, and I'm not testifying, but that the originally approved plans was to save walls, particularly a front facade, and the other ones. And my understanding is the front facade collapsed. And it's my understanding that the owners are going to have a very difficult time, if not impossible time, to reconstruct what was there, which was way over 100 years old. And so there's got to be some, I assume, some revisions to those plans in order to finish this project. And I'll place Mr. Biggert under oath, and he can respond to that, I guess. Mr. Biggert, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury?
I do.
You want to speak to this issue and revision of the plans?
Certainly. So the fact that I only have the ability to renew a permit one time, which is what we did. And then that expired. So as it indicates in the code, essentially, we have to start from scratch. I guess the good news to that is, being if we're starting from scratch, this is certainly an opportunity for the homeowners to change plans. If there's some, the fact that they originally were renovating or adding on, they're kind of constrained to what was there. So this may be an opportunity for them to revise plans, simplify plans, because I know some of what was agreed to save had a lot of detail. So this is an opportunity they can, if they choose, they could just resubmit the same plans for approval, or take an opportunity to revise them and simplify them, or whatever they would choose to do. But it does need to go through the full process from the beginning.
Can I ask some questions?
Well, maybe Mr. Patrick.
I believe I guess Mr. Angie can speak to that, or either of the property owners, Mr. or Mrs., as far as.
Why don't we just swear in the
Yes.
three people there, and if they speak, that's fine. Please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the case now in hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God, or the penalty of perjury? And would you just each say your full name for the record?
Nick DeSillo, Mark Angie.
Mr. DeSillo, could you explain the practical position you're in right now as far as the building, what needs to be done at obtaining the permit, how much alteration would be needed, if any, or what the plans that were submitted?
I don't believe at this point that we have any plans to make any substantial changes to the drawings at this point. And in order to move things forward in a manner that everyone would be agreeable to. The house has come thus far. We wanted to preserve it for a reason. So I believe at this point, we would keep the plans as they are. We're far enough in construction that we wouldn't make any major changes.
We'd like to note for the record that the family are not flippers. They came here to live permanently. They're familiar with the valley. They have a history in the valley. So this wasn't something that was to be flipped, and I think most of the members know the reasons for the delays. The elephant in the room, if there was a money problem, there isn't now. That back lot was to be sold. Right now it's static. All things considered, they may go forward and keep the back lot. Again, as far as the construction remedy, the owner can speak for itself, but we think that's been solved with Mr. Angie.
I think to kind of give an overview over the construction process, there was many delays on both ends. First, it started with village requirements from ARB in historic review. We went back and forth, got some civil drawings. It was quite a lengthy process getting up to that point. Once we were under construction, the intent, although there's certain members of the community that believe our intent was to knock it down, the intent was to preserve the home and build the home with additions to preserve the main structure. There was no amount of research or expert opinion we could have gathered to predict or have any idea on what we were going to find when we started doing our additions and saw that the home was not suitable to be, it wasn't structurally sound. So
If that's relevant, Mr. DeSillo could go into the Pandora's box as far as trying to preserve that front wall. What they found when they thought there was a cinder block foundation, there was a facade, it was a sham, it was a wood foundation. Any of the wood structure that, another point, and again, Mr. De Silva can testify, he had two architects spec out this reconstruction. He had two building professionals. He may look it, but he's no babe in the woods himself.
Can he speak to this?
Yes.
So we did plenty of research leading up to this point. So again, I guess, let me know the relevance of this, but what I wanted to speak to was the major setback and delay was the decision made by the village to preserve the front wall. By that point in construction, we had already built our foundation, our block foundation around three sides of the home. So the decision that was given to us by the village to preserve the front wall, although I understand from a dimensional and characteristic perspective, that caused an incredible amount of cost in construction and limited our ability to demolish the rotting structure that was within, that was supposed to be the core of the new home. Had that decision not been made, a couple of days of demolition, a couple of dumpsters, and a piece of heavy equipment would have solved this, would have gotten the home safely down and hauled away, where we would have a clean slate to build the new home. So I understand most of the evidence that was presented at the previous meeting was given against the things that we did not follow through with, but there was things that the village dictated along the way that altered our process and also drug it out. So, anyways, to the original question, we do not plan to alter the home. We wanted to keep it as it was, so there wouldn't be any purpose for us to submit any substantially different drawings for ARB.
And today.
I'm confused. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm confused because you were to preserve the front wall facade.
Mhm.
It's not there anymore. And are you going to actually try to rebuild that exact same front facade?
Yes, we still have the sawtooth trim molding in the backyard, so we can get dimensions and remake that. It was our intent to preserve the front wall, and it was preserved to the best of our ability. So is there something, what could I clarify?
Well, the second thing that was raised by your attorney was the issue of financing,
Yes,
which has been a problem and which you admitted to at the ABR hearing.
the
And has
project,
that been resolved at this point, and what evidence do you have that it's been? resolved?
the project had started as a home renovation, and when that budget nearly tripled and the timeline tripled, that limited our ability for financing, refinancing, any sort of long-term traditional lending that we could have secured prior to the project, had that been the course of action that we were going to take. Enough time has passed at this point. We've got a plan to move forward based on our agreement with Mr. Angie moving forward.
And that's the central point of asking for a continuance. Mr. Angie's been traveling out of state also. They have a meeting of the minds, proceed as soon as possible. It was suggested, and it's part of my nature, to have a four corners agreement, construction agreement between the builder and the owners. Between my absence, Mr. Angie's absence, we don't have the scrivening power to just spit something out like that. And again, that can't be finalized until they know the scope of work that ARB will demand for a new permit. So that's my main problem for a continuance, is present the evidence that in good faith, it's not just oral, they're going forward in black and white. Are there any other questions of any of the witnesses?
So I've got some. As I understand our internal processes here, the building permits expired to have the exact same house rebuilt without any change in the plans. That's what you're saying. Would require you to restart the process, and Mr. Angie should know this. That would require you to appear before the Historic District Subcommittee, the Architectural Board, and the Planning and Zoning Committee. So that's three
Not clear.
additional,
Setback? No, it's a.
At least two, perhaps three P and Z if there's a setback requirement. You should just know that that is another set of procedures that you need to go through. All of those exist for every other homeowner in town here. There's nothing punitive being applied to you or to anybody else. That's the process we go through. If you've been in this village for so long and you've traveled through it 9,000 times and so on, you know that dealing with in a historic village with historic homes, it takes longer to get things done. And when you peel back the wallpaper and you look under the foundation, there always are more difficulties. So I'm empathetic to that, but at the same time, you know, that's part of building and refurnishing an old house. So the question is this, you know, Mr. DeSolo, you came here on the 8th of October. That's close to 6 weeks ago. You told us at that time you could have the exterior done in 30 days. You then changed that to 30 workdays. We're probably a month out of those 30 workdays done. And we really have nothing more than what we had from you on October 8th. We have Mr. Angie showing up, but we haven't yet heard from him. And we haven't heard the status of your contract negotiations with him.
But 30, we weren't permitted to perform any work. I was told not to perform work, correct?
I understand.
You're telling me within 30 days, it's been almost 30 days.
That's
but
correct.
I wasn't allowed to perform work.
I wasn't expecting you to perform work, but you said you would be able to do it. You'd have the whole thing done by the end of December. Now you don't even have a contract and it's been 6 weeks.
Back to that, they have a contract, it just hasn't been reduced to writing. It's
Well,
a
yeah.
contract.
So maybe you can explain the contract for us. Well, maybe you can explain what the contract is, because I think as we've indicated, we would be interested in seeing something written that has a contract and has financing that goes with it. Otherwise, this is just conversation.
I think financing is completely extant from contract for performance for a builder. Another thing that was mentioned is, sorry, you stated one other point that I really contest as far as the vocabulary. I think it's inaccurate. Again, there is a contract, it's binding, there's been performance, it hasn't been produced to writing, and the contract is a simple cost plus.
Well, maybe we could hear from Mr. Angie or Mr. DeSillo what the contract is. That's the verbal contract.
So I was brought in 1 week ago. There was no possible way I could get him any type of estimate before we engaged in a contract until he saw the numbers. So in 1 week, I couldn't produce anything like that for the amount of work that needs to be done there. So we've broken it into two parts. We're getting them an estimate to complete the exterior with the finishes that were approved by the community here. There is some gray area that we're trying to work through, such as the front porch has to be rebuilt because it has deteriorated and it needs to be reconstructed. What are those materials going to be required? There's the fireplace has to be reconstructed. What does it have to adhere to? Is it a complete masonry fireplace? Will the city allow, which I doubt, an insert, and then we wood frame it and veneer it with stone? Those are some of the unknowns that I don't have in order to complete. Most of my numbers are in, but this is a really busy climate, and I expect to have something for them mid to end of next week that they could, with question marks next to them, sign a contract if they so choose.
So, and pardon me, Mr. Mayor, I did not have an interview with you. I was going to ask Counselor Mr. Biggert, how long would that take going through those additional steps that I was not aware of that they would have to resubmit? You've mentioned 3 different processes.
Dave, what's the regular schedule and what could we do?
Well, certainly, I think it's simplified in that the law director has said no need for planning and zoning regarding setbacks. So we're down to 2 meetings, one being the historic subcommittee and the architectural board. Normally, they each meet once a month. Now, I think, given that if they're just going to submit the same plans, we can certainly try to schedule some special meetings.
A joint meeting?
Maybe even a joint meeting if we can do that. So I again, it's based on availability of members and this time of year and everything, but certainly I don't see any reason we can't attempt to speed up the normal first Thursday of the month and third Wednesday of the month. So we could certainly do what we could try to do what we can for that.
You know, some of the concerns that come to mind is if we agree on on the price to reconstruct, you know, to finish the project, you know, we're coming up against some bad weather here, and we do work through the winter. But there's things that we won't be able to do that will you accept, such as, you know, landscaping, a concrete driveway, and will there be a contingency for something such as that? Painting. It's going to be tough to paint the house. There's a pre-finished product Hardy sells that it will look completed, but the details won't be in it because of that. And if that's going to be acceptable.
Well, I would say this, and you brought up the fireplace. There is nothing that would prohibit you, you know, this is going to be a little bit 6, 1/2 dozen on the other for you. There's nothing that prohibits you from submitting plans for a framed fireplace with stone veneer and an insert. Now you're back to now you got to revise plans, you got to get those revised plans in. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my point. You have an opportunity to really do what you want and present how you want to do it. This is your time, but now you have some time to spend in revising those things.
I
So,
think I'm going to have to leave that up to the DeSotos when they get the pricing.
Right.
Because we're talking $50,000 versus $10,000.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
so that's going to be their decision.
Right.
You know, obviously, this is a very emotional issue and a very difficult issue for us on council and for the DeSillos. I remember when they came to council in '23 and talked about some of the issues that they faced and wanting to demolish the, you know, the building and come up with a new plan and permit. It was difficult for them and very difficult for, you know, for us. So that's kind of one side. On the other side, for me, this has been going on since the permit was granted in, what was it, in November of '22. And certainly there have been a lot of unexpected kind of problems with the building. But along the way, you know, the building director and ARB has worked, I believe, with the DeSillos for some compromises. And including the last permit that was given was really just to finish the outside of the building. There wasn't even a request to finish the construction, but just the outside of the building. And that hasn't been, you know, completed. Back in February of '24, there was a violation notice sent via certified mail that the building was a public nuisance. There was no response to that, and that kind of carried on to the point where in October, a letter had to be sent saying that the property was unsafe and that there would be a hearing before the Architectural Review Board. So again, my concern is that this has been a very difficult and emotional process. I think everyone would have liked to see this building be completed and even now be completed. But when and how much longer and what kind of assurances
So I don't think
do
I
we
can
have?
speak to that. I was just brought on board a week ago.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to help resolve the problem
Yeah.
and get the family in a home.
Well, it's not directed at you because
No, I
you've just been
understand. I
brought in
understand
a
completely.
week ago,
I,
but to the
but
owner.
what I explained to them is if we can get an agreement on the cost, if they can have the financing in place to take care of the cost, we could get started right away. I will make sure that I get all my crews on it. And I'm not going to promise you I'll be done in 10 days. I'm not going to promise you I'll be done in 2 months, but it will get right on it. And, you know, a project of that nature, my estimate would be 2 months would be completely lived in, not in the interior, but on the exterior. So it's financing and the completion of all these estimates that we have to get from the contractors are quite busy right now. So.
I am asking the village, it's sort of like the tail chasing the dog here. If the village has any recommendations as far as timetables, protocol, go ahead.
Based on our last meeting, we talked about a builder being a potential solution. I appreciate the time schedule that you had laid out and I agree in the frustrations. The contractor, I'm a contractor. I don't do home construction, but I'm familiar with all parts of home building and commercial building. We intended to build this ourselves, so one day we could, pass it down to our children, and we hammered the nails and we did that. And we did quite a bit of it, but unfortunately that might be in vain at this point. But regardless, we did that with the help of a couple other tradesmen and contractors and crews, framers and people that were performing services that we were not. The person that had been doing the work, we had presented him with our issues and said, we need to put together a package and we need to present Gates Mills with something that they can understand that will be brought to completion. Unfortunately, after multiple attempts, he did not provide that information in a manner that was going to be acceptable to us or the village. So I also want to make clear to you that we did not wait until last week to engage with, we had engaged with our previous contractor who we had been relying on up to this point. So my information was only as good as what I was being given. And I understand that I bear the responsibility of that. But I also wanted to speak to why Mr. Angie was only brought on. It was a little bit more than a week ago, but recently. The person that had been doing the work thus far and helping us with the trade work was just not going to be an acceptable and suitable person to help us finish the home. Although I was serving as the general contractor, if he was not to perform, I didn't have alternate resources.
I've got two questions for you, if you don't mind, Nick.
Yeah.
One is, my understanding is there were some historic artifacts in the original home. I don't know exactly what they are. I know there was a plaque. I know there was stagecoach steps. There was something to do with the surround in the beams and the surround on the fireplace. What's the status of those things, and are they still recoverable, or are they gone at this point? That's question number
We
one.
still have the plaque. The stagecoach, there's a stone that was from the front yard that we still have that, if that's what you're speaking of. And then most of the historic value, as I understood it from the historic meetings, was to be preserved in the front porch, and those items, not the entire porch, but specific items as individual beams and the sawtooth molding, have been preserved to be duplicated. I don't believe that there was any historic value in the fireplace. On the interior, it was just masonry. So there was no wood beams, to the best of my knowledge. I think there was a beam that was to be preserved in the home, the carriage house in the rear. That was part of the original structure a long time ago, but unfortunately that was infested with insects, which is why that structure needed to be demolished and was not to be preserved at all. But the other items that we could preserve, we have.
Okay, second question is, are you willing to, presuming there was a written contract, are you willing to put the money in escrow more and then at least enough money to complete the project?
I'll have to object to that. There are many, many alternative ways other than putting money in escrow to pay a builder. So.
And
Not to answer.
I'll ask a question on that. Can you explain what some of those would be so that the village has some assurances that,
Absolutely.
to your point about mutual,
Correct.
everyone wants to see this done?
Again, I've done this many times over many years. You can deed the property to a builder with restrictions on as far as the return. You could do a purchase money, not a purchase money mortgage, you could do a note and mortgage with certain call dates, severe interest rates. So the builder would be protected, even with cognovits.
But
Wait,
is it direct?
So that's at least a couple of the alternatives. We don't want to get into private financing. His age prohibited certain loan applications to date. That's why Mrs. DeSillo's father is on the mortgage for the property, for the financing. So, but otherwise, yeah, the builder isn't going to go forward unless he's 100% comfortable that there's security for anything owed him. So essentially, I'm looking at it like a blank check from Mr. Angie. That whatever is needed, he's gonna have a note, mortgage, or the deed in his name.
We are comfortable setting a certain amount of money aside to guarantee the builder and the village, if required, assurance that there's financing to move forward.
Did the original purchase price of the home require a mortgage? Is there currently a mortgage on the home?
Yes.
Sorry?
Is there currently a mortgage on the home?
Yes.
So what deed would you be able to give to Mr.
Well-
Angie or somebody else?
There's already $270,000 out of pocket, not including any labor costs on the site. It's, I believe, approximately a 2-parcel site, 7+ acres or something. The construction that Mr. Angie would complete, which is in the records, would be the exterior, just as described today. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the ultimate equity in the property. That's my understanding.
So I'm,
Presumably, the collateral on the original mortgage was the
Pardon?
original structure,
Pardon?
presumably.
Pardon?
Presumably, the collateral for the original mortgage was the original structure. The original structure doesn't exist anymore, so what's the collateral now?
I think the original structure was a liability. It's proven in hindsight to be a liability. I don't think that the mortgage lender would look at that original structure and give it any kind of value. It's really in the land. And you've got guarantors, I'm sure, personal guarantors on the notes. Actually, there's no corporation involved. Another sign of good faith here. They're not flipping.
so, and I'm sorry, just another question. So is Mr. Angie being brought on to complete the construction of the home? Or just to get the exterior of the house buttoned up and,
At this point, the exterior buttoned up.
okay, so then 2 months down the road, we've got a home that's done on the exterior, but no driveway, and the interior finishes, no drywall, HVAC, all the other things that go on with cabinets, wall
Correct.
coverings and so
We're
forth.
again, and I question the ARB's standing to declare a public nuisance, and as I've briefed, I don't think it's a public nuisance. That's all beside the point. That's my legal spiel. Mr. DeSillo could answer your questions.
It is our intent, as we've learned, it is not within my capacity or our family's capacity to continue this project ourselves, to continue to engage with Mr. Angie to finish the completion of the project. To address the village's immediate concern of the exterior of the home, we've asked him to forego quoting the interior cabinet knobs and things that are not of concern to anybody else in our effort to expedite getting a quote to the point where we can finish the exterior, since that's what we're all very concerned about. But our hope is that he would continue the project, as we've realized that it is beyond our means to do so ourselves.
So, Mr.
within a
DeSillo, how are you gonna pay for the completing the exterior? The original home that you purchased has a mortgage on it, whether the home, and the home is no longer there. So whether it's a liability, as your counsel said, or it was an asset. And you've put $250,000 into the framing and the other kinds of things that you just said you put $277,000 into. So now you got another 6-figure amount, whatever Mr. Angie and you come up with, to finish the exterior. Is this equity? Is there another loan? Is this, what assurance does the village have that the money exists to finish the exterior of the home?
Object for the record, and the witness may answer. I think
We
it's-
intend to pay for it and we have the ability to do so, but I'm not going to tell you, as I have in previous meetings, something I can't fulfill. So if Mr. Angie provides me with a quote for $300,000 that he needs in the next day, I'm not going to be able to fulfill that. Now, some amount less than that I can do, but until I see that number, I can't make a commitment to you or to him as to what that amount may be and how we are going to pay for it.
Okay, but to
We
Mr.
do
Press's
intend to pay
question,
cash on the project. At this point, our hands are tied from getting a mortgage or remortgaging or finishing at this stage of the project. We don't really, our ability to obtain traditional financing for this project in its stage is limited.
Yes, but you also told us it's cost plus. So Mr. Angie's estimate, he's wrong. There has to be funding for the overrun that could happen. He's not on the hook to finish it.
Understood, but I can't anticipate what the cost plus would be if we don't see the base estimate. And also, Mr. Angie has already brought things to our attention that I wouldn't have noticed. There's masonry issues, there's structural issues, there's things that we would have gone through and during the season, during the time. I've done masonry, I'm not an expert, done roofing, I'm not an expert. There's things he's already pointed out in order for us to avoid, which is why we've decided to engage with him to help us uncover those unforeseen issues as much as possible.
I think maybe inadvertently, you may be building a case for the ARB's recommendation.
So
And the other let me just
Okay,
follow up with
okay.
one question. I'm confused about one thing, which is the day after, I think it was the day after the ARB meeting on the 8th of October, a for sale sign went up on the property. And that was kind of the day after you said that you'd like to continue to rebuild and move your family into that home. So if you could just clarify what was going on there?
We had told council that it was our intent to find a buyer or find a solution for council or for the village. The home had been placed for sale prior to that, actually with the property. The sign had been removed, and it was nothing beyond irony that somebody reinstalled the sign, but it is still our intent to do so.
So three questions. One is, in terms of the cash payment, would you be able to get a letter of credit or something like that that would establish that there is a fund to fund the initial construction? And secondly, what happens if you do run into unforeseen issues? And then finally, what's your plan for completion of the interior so that the house would be livable?
Again, just for the record, and the witness may answer, I've objected, and I've also said that there are legal alternatives to ensure payment, many, that are pretty commonplace. So, Mr. DeSillo can continue if you like. Would you like me to? Would you like me to continue? What was the question? I'm sorry.
If you encounter unforeseen consequences, unforeseen issues in the initial, completion of the exterior, and then what would be your plan and timing for completion of the interior so that the house would be livable?
I can't speak to circumstances I don't know about.
Right now, the single issue is to complete the outside. It's pretty well established. That's the exigency. It's an eyesore. It's an obvious, to some extent, an embarrassment to council and the mayor. But it is, bottom line, an aesthetic problem right now. And that's the way I would approach this if this unfortunately would have to go to court. I disagree with the definition of the ARB's declaring it nuisance. Again, I'm going a little far afield here. The issue before us is the merits of a continuance and their good faith. And it's like the dog chasing its tail.
I'm still
Right.
working on the continuum.
I just want to clarify and confirm that the issue before you is completing the exterior of the home. We have no requirement that their interior be completed and someone live there. There's no requirement in the village with respect to that. If someone wants to live there, then all of that comes into play.
And that's under our ordinances, that is the case? Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So I have some questions that tend to go to continuance. So, and these would be questions for Mr. Biggert. So, permits issued January 9th, 2023, that was the first permit, right?
Correct.
And that permit expired, I think February. They were given a notice February 19th that the permit expired. Right? 2024, February 19th, 2024.
Correct.
And in the interim, and I understand we've had a lot of discussion about the historic nature of the structure and all this, but all of the historic nature issues occurred before the expiration of that permit. I think that front wall came down. I mean, I think everything was down, and I think the house was sitting as it looks right now, as of that date. Is that correct?
Correct.
So then I see the windows were delivered at the site. And then on March 27th, a conditional permit extension was granted for the outside the completion of the outside of the structure, right?
27th March of 2024, correct.
2024.
New permit was issued.
And at that point, then ARB was already aware of the fact that the facade was down and had approved drawings that would have completed the structure, the exterior as it is now, correct?
No, the plans that were approved by the architectural board was retaining the front wall, technically additional walls, the fireplace and the porch.
Okay.
That's what was approved. It was after that no longer existed and
Right.
they built it as is. So
So
that's part of the issue. Technically, they did not follow the approved plans or the approved permit.
okay. And so there are no approved plans to complete this as it sits right now.
Exactly, correct. Yes,
But a conditional permit was granted on March 27th.
right.
And then nothing happened until, nothing happened at the
Nothing
time.
happened.
So my question for Mr. DeSillo is, what happened during that time? And nothing, absolutely nothing changed. You got an extension, nothing changed.
What happened in the interim? Any unforeseen difficulties, anything new?
Yes, our ability of our contractors to, his performance, he was unable to perform.
Okay.
There was a delay, so, there was a large delay to our windows.
Okay.
So until the point those windows got delivered, that process took roughly about 9 months.
But the windows were delivered before the extension was.
The windows that were specified to be installed were extremely specific and took an extraordinary amount of time to get in. So the amount of time, so that was a significant delay.
Who dictated the design of the windows?
The members of ARB.
Okay, but as I understand, the windows were delivered and stored on March 15th. The permit extension was granted March 27th. So the windows were already there. And then nothing budged. There's no new drawings. Nothing changed at the site.
Financial.
Okay, all right.
That was,
Okay, so.
at that point, the project duration had gone exceedingly long. The windows had been delivered. We came upon some unforeseen circumstances with our financing.
Okay, okay, all right, so that explains, because at least as far as considering it a continuance, that nothing happened, and it was 7 months, so, okay. And, all right.
Because of the delay of the windows, which kind of stalled that process, that limited our first round of our ability to finance some of the project. The duration took us outside of that window.
Mr. Angie, you certainly, your reputation for good building precedes you, and you're taking on a project here and you're putting your name on it.
I know. I've met with the homeowners. I did a project for for his brother Michael. We worked with them for approximately a year on their project, and Nick reached out to me and said, hey, I've had some problems with contractors in the past. I don't know if you're willing to take this on, but I'm in a pinch, and I agreed to it. I told him I would try and bail him out. So my name is on it. My name will be in front of it, and I will assure all of you that it will be completed. As long as he can get the finances in order. Obviously that sounds like it could be a problem, but we're going to try to work through that as well with making sure that I I get payment. And that I understand for you is a concern as well if he bellies up, and I would be as well, but they're assuring me that we can try and make these arrangements happen, and I will work with them to try and help them any way I can with my resources. There's some things that I think have to happen for a bank to look at it. Currently in the state that it's in, I don't think a bank's gonna look at it. Once the windows are plugged in and once it looks like a house on the outside, I think there's a better chance of a bank giving them the money. Now, I think that the land itself does hold value. And how much that is, I'm not an appraiser, but hopefully that works in their favor. So that in itself is what they're gonna rely on to, have some equity in the property to gain that, or, a rich uncle.
Okay, so hold that thought. So, Mr. Biggert, it sounds like they need drawings that could be approved by ARB that complete the exterior of the building. It sounds like step one
Yes,
is drawings.
yes. Once those are approved, that allows me then to issue a new permit based on those drawings.
Mr. DeSillo, do you have someone retained that can do those drawings?
Same architect that did the original prints.
Dave, would there be a problem with just resubmitting what was approved?
If that's what they want to build, certainly that might work in your favor if you're saying these are the same plans that were approved
We've done
prior.
enough of the work with the exception of the finish of the fireplace that
Right.
was intended to be saved. There, again, there's not going to be substantial changes. We have no intent in changing the structure. There's no reason at this point where it's at in the construction process to demolish or change anything that's been approved thus far.
So would you need an amendment to the existing prints because on the existing prints, it says fireplace is.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
yes, certainly. I mean,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
That's where I was confused, is that the current approved plan
Yes.
contemplate
yes,
painting the,
yes.
like the first two studs and the front of the wall, the porch.
There are no current approved plans. We're starting from scratch. But if they're building exactly what the previous plans were, other than terms of existing brick to remain, existing fireplace to remain, you take those off. The drawings show the new structure or the structure as it would be new.
May I ask if it would be allowed to at least dry the home in, not touch any of the siding, not do any of the, we won't put the roof on it, but could we plug the windows in and close the house up just for the sake of the home being exposed to the elements for all of this time?
I leave that to council, mayor and council's decision. Certainly from a building official standpoint, I guess I would have no objection, again, as long as ultimately the plans that will be submitted for, would follow that.
Concerned about this thing being in the
Makes sense. And
elements for
yeah,
another year.
yeah, and looking at the roof earlier today, it looks like some of the plywood or the sheeting's exposed and is gonna need replaced. So certainly sitting in its present condition does nobody any good.
Conditional, an extension is granted with conditions that would be primary, that there would be some access, not to change anything structural, but just to try to make it as weather.
Try it in, yeah, try it in. Again, I leave that discretion to council.
So Todd, if this talk about drying in, I'm not foreseeing, but currently there is no approved building permit for the property.
Expired.
Right, it's expired. So is that something that we could even do? To authorize them to dry it in? If there is no building.
I don't see any reason why not.
Again,
Again, and that assumes that there's going to be some type of continuance. And I don't think we've actually pinned down how much time is necessary to put the contract and the financing in place.
Well, I think we've been conflating our questioning a little bit. I'm still on the continuance
Right.
Right.
issue.
Right.
So, that was my thing about, do you have someone to do drawings? So the question is, how long would it take to either get drawings that are sufficient to even dry it in? Or,
It's my impression with just the two cosmetic things that would be altered because they no longer exist, that it's ready to go. Just
So I
erase.
do understand that a new set of drawings would need to be submitted, but as it was reflected in the drawings that we submitted to Dave, the dimensions, all of the actual dimensions and layout of the home have been included in the original set of drawings, and those haven't changed. So the specificity of saving the 2x4 studs on the front wall or the 2x6s was marked in the prints, but the dimensions haven't changed. So those same prints in theory should be, with the exceptions of some notes.
Right.
Notes and specific alterations. The dimensions themselves wouldn't change, the structure wouldn't change, the building materials wouldn't change. That porch has been drawn into the drawings. Those dimensions wouldn't be changed, those dimensions still hold. The porch isn't gonna go to the side of the house instead of the front. It would be rebuilt as it was approved, and those dimensions have been previously reflected.
Mr.
Yeah,
DeSillo,
those
have you-
drawing, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Have you talked to your architect? And is he or she available to update these drawings in the next week or two?
In a reasonable amount of time, yes. He's
What's
available.
reasonable amount of time?
2 weeks.
Have you talked to him?
I've spoken to him, yes.
He's available,
Yes.
okay?
He's
2
still
weeks.
participating in the project.
Just trying to
Under- yep,
frame this in from years to months to weeks to days.
Understood.
Dave,
Yes.
question?
I was just, so in your packet, Scott, you should have received a copy of the original, the very first plans. Those were the plans of record when the very first permit was issued. Those were then the same plans I used to extend the permit. Now, if council chooses to allow the dry-in, I am comfortable with taking those same plans and using those as the record set to dry it in, along with, whether it's from the attorney or Mark, a list of what dry-in means. I'm gonna put the windows in. I'm gonna put armor, whatever, on the roof. I'll replace the sheathing. Whatever that list is, I am happy to do that if council was acceptable to do that. I don't need a whole new set of drawings just for it to show the same thing. Yes, the current ones say existing chimney remain. Ultimately, that should be taken off for the new approval and the new permit. But for the dry-in, I'm happy to use the current site.
it seems like we have to figure either yes or no on a continuance, and then whether we feel there's any conditions applicable to a continuance, the same as we would on a decision on an appeal, as to whether there's any conditions or things that we
Right.
think would be different. So, I mean, I'm trying to do this in the right order.
And you are.
And
Okay.
that, and what you're talking about, I mean, makes sense, filling in so that it doesn't deteriorate any further. But then that implies that, again, there's a continuation of the building. And I still don't feel very comfortable about about the financing or the contracting.
Yeah, I'm not sure about just the dry-in part. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Like, if I could speak for council, it doesn't set any kind of precedent. Just because one thing is permitted, that doesn't mean it's a waiver of anything else. And again, you have mutual needs here, ASAP for completion.
can we deliberate this in private, Todd?
Yes.
Are we allowed to have you come in to ask?
Ask
how
legal
we-
questions,
if
to
we
give legal advice,
create
yeah,
Something, legal advice on
that's correct.
if we were interested in that?
Although on these types of deliberations in administrative hearings, you're like a judge.
Hmm.
The judge is a public official. And they, in the Court of Appeals, deliberate as a group in private, and that's what you're doing. However, I like to go the next step, and that is actually to pass a motion to go into executive session, which would be to obtain advice from the village attorney.
So I would make a motion that we go into executive session to obtain advice from the village law director and to deliberate the issue of a continuance only.
Can I ask a question first? If it'd be okay, Scott, of Mr. Bickert. So given that the building has been exposed to the elements for quite some time, and looking at some of the photos of the area, is there any concern that it is not restorable at this point?
I don't think it's to the point of not restorable. I think Mr. Angie had mentioned there's some concerns and some stuff that's gonna need some repair. I don't think it's not restorable.
Thanks, Dave.
One section of the flat roof that ARB demanded. And I should note that the appellants, everything that ARB has asked, without any contest at all, was agreed to by the appellants. But I think it's just one section of that flat roof speaking in one point. I mean, I've been there.
If I could just kind of address that, so at some point in around September 28th to 23, the DeSillas did ask me if the hip roof, which actually was in one of the early submissions, would be acceptable to the board. And I did take that to the boards and they did approve the hip roof. So we're back to them just not performing the work. And I met with them on the site and I told them in person that that was approved. And I believe I even sketched it on the set of plans that are in the house. So just as a note, so it was approved.
I'm going to renew my motion for an executive session.
Hold on, any other conversation, discussion on the motion? Okay, roll call.
Patton,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes.
Press, Steinbrink,
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Okay, we'll excuse ourselves and we'll be back at some time in the future. Thank you all for waiting. We're going to reconvene the hearing. I believe Mr. Broom will have a motion.
So I make a motion that we grant we call petitioners, the appellant's motion for a continuance for 28 days on the following conditions, that in 28 days, the appellants bring a signed specific agreement with a builder, an executed agreement that shows the building plan, that they bring revised drawings that will be approved by the Architectural Board of Review and the Historic Subcommittee, and that they bring evidence of financing sufficient that the builder who has the signed agreement will complete exterior work within 60 days following the next hearing in 28 days. And that on those conditions, we will grant a 28-day continuance of this hearing and keep the hearing open.
Yes.
Any other comments or council members wish to make comments on that? Now we'll ask Mr. Petronite if he has any comments.
Comment. Assume that council has checked their calendars as far as holidays or whatever on the 28-day.
It's our next regular
Regular meeting, thank
day,
you.
but it will probably be starting earlier than this week.
Thank you. And you have our appreciation. One other sticky matter, and I don't know who controls the decision, but the Mr. Cicero, the prosecutor whom I've worked with before, has filed the typical zoning violation, criminal complaint, and it threatens thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in fines. And I really would petition not to go through the typical 30-day go to court, 30-day continuance, 30-day continuance. If the village can consult with the prosecutor and the law director to see if that can be told, if not dismissed, but it is pending and it really doesn't help people's, it's a hammer, we understand that, but it really doesn't help the situation here. It inflames it and it wastes my money, their money on me.
I've discussed the status of the criminal case with the prosecutor today. My understanding is that there was a plea of not guilty. There's not been a pretrial schedule, there's no trial scheduled at this point in time, and it'll get us past the 28 days from now to see where we're at. That's all I can tell you.
Comments from the audience? Appreciate you being here today and speaking of residents and villagers or neighbors. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? We appreciate you being here today. We understand that we have neighbors, residents, and villagers.
They can't
Question, please.
speak. No, this is a hearing. It was not a meeting.
Well, I'm sorry, Dennis, I was out of line, out of order, so
Need to vote. We have a motion on the table.
I understand.
Say-
Okay, roll call, please.
Eton,
Yes.
Broom,
Yes.
Deacon,
Yes,
Press, Steinbrink.
Yes.
Turner, Welsh.
Okay, motion passes.
Continued until,
So today's proceedings will continue in 28 days. Thank you all for attending.
this is not a public.